Hi, today we're going to talk about getting ready to end your field experience. So we hope by the end of this lecture you'll be able to apply agency policies and accepted practice guidelines to successfully terminate client and administrative work at your internship site. So when we talk about termination, what do you think of? What do you think of about the word termination? Well, termination means the end. It's the final stage of the helping relationship, and it marks the end of the therapeutic alliance that you formed with your client. And this termination stage can be as important as any other stage in the helping relationship. It's the last interaction many clients will have with you. And in fact, for some, it's the most profoundly healing, meaningful, and transformative phase of the helping process. Many of our clients don't have a very good history or experience with endings, and one gift we can give to our clients is to model a successful and mutually beneficial ending process with our clients. So what are the different types of termination in human services? First, let's talk about forced termination. This happens before the goals of the healing process have been met. It can be because the program closes or the client moved or switched to another program. But most relevant to our situation is the forced termination brought about by the limited time of an internship. So this is very challenging because the termination doesn't necessarily coincide with client needs. It's often just as things are getting started with your client in terms of trust and in terms of starting your intervention with them. And unlike, sometimes when clients end with the agency, there's not necessarily an opportunity for them to return to you unless you happen to get a job at your internship agency. The other types of termination, one is a termination that the client initiates. So this can be a positive thing when the client feels like she's met her goals, when the symptoms that brought the client to you have been reduced or eliminated. Or it can be negative when the client feels uncomfortable working with you or unable to engage with you, when you don't do what the client wants you to do. Sometimes the client will just terminate. There's also termination that you as the human service worker might initiate. And again, this can be positive. When the client meets their goals, when the client gains insight and skills to manage their own problems, and you've helped them to do that. Sometimes you might terminate because the client presents with a problem that you do not have the expertise to deal with, and you need to refer them to someone who does. And sometimes it can be a negative termination, where you find out there's some kind of conflict of interest where you might know the client's mother, or your client works for an organization that is doing some personal work for you, or it can be because the client broke the rules of the organization, maybe in terms of violence towards another client or acting out some way in the agency setting. So no matter what type of termination, clients are going to have reactions to the termination. And these reactions will be individualized based on the client's history with endings, their cultural background, and their history with the agency, where the client is in the course of their treatment, what their diagnosis is, etc. And you can be certain that one aspect of their reaction will be some part of the stages of grief. Denial that you're leaving, or anger that you're leaving, some kind of bargaining. Can I just, see you outside of the agency setting? They may be sad or depressed, or they may come to acceptance of your leaving, depending on how it's handled. There may be some regression or relapse into the original problem that brought them to the agency. They may avoid you. They may not come back and see you to do the successful ending once they learn that you're leaving. They may feel abandoned, or they may increase their demands on you. They might be afraid, or anxious, resistant, or indifferent. All of the above reactions can be problematic, but for some clients, termination will be fine. They'll have finished the work you set out to do together. They're okay with transferring to a new worker or a new agency. They are ready, and you've helped them to get ready. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can help them to get ready. But first, let's talk a little bit about your own reactions to termination. You may feel guilty for abandoning your client. You may feel responsible for whatever happens next to the client. You may be frustrated that you didn't finish with the client. You may have a feeling of omnipotence. No one else can work with this client like me. Or impotence. I wasn't here long enough to make a difference. You may be sad. You may be relieved if it's a particularly challenging client. You may be reluctant to let go of success. You may be ambivalent. Or you may be excited or satisfied. You may wonder what happened to your client. So here's some things you can do to ensure that your termination with clients is as successful as possible. You should plan ahead. You should introduce the idea of termination very early. In fact, you should be telling clients in the first session and kind of what your timeline is for being there, and then continuing to refer to the timeline. In about 3 to 4 meetings prior to the last meeting, you want to get very clear to the client that the end is near. One thing you can do during the quarter break is kind of preview termination. If you're taking off a couple weeks, if you took off a couple weeks between quarters, you could help the client to kind of see how they cope without you during that break. Or reflect back and say, see, I was gone for 2 weeks and you did fine. You should anticipate challenges, particularly clients who might have particular difficulty, and work extra hard with them. You want to explore the client's history with endings. Explore your own history with endings with your supervisor. And then use your supervision meetings to discuss termination strategies, how you'll work with the client, where you'll refer the client, etc. With individual clients, this is kind of the process for termination. You want to review your experience with the clients, both the process and the progress that the clients made. Review the skills and the insights and the resources that the client gained from working with you. Explore your feelings and their feelings. Help clients explore their feelings related to the ending, and monitor your own feelings and discuss with your supervisor. Help the client make specific plans. Help the client prepare for future anticipated challenges. Help the client make a plan to address any unresolved issues. That might be a referral. Explore how to strengthen the client's support system. Refer or transfer the client to a new worker. You might do a written transfer summary, which includes the client history, issues, and future plans. And if possible, if you can introduce the client in person to the new person, that might make for a smoother transition. Allow the client to find a way to give you meaningful feedback and to evaluate your work together. And say goodbye. Ending rituals are very important. Don't just say, see you later, let's keep in touch. Be really clear that it's goodbye. But also leave the client with something. You can give them a thank you note, a token of the work together, some kind of something. That memory book is sometimes done depending on the relationship. Express appreciation for the work, for what the work that the client has given. Express appreciation for what you have been given by working with the client, what you've learned from them, what you admire about them and their strengths. And don't be open to post-termination contact. It's not really a good idea. And then with groups, how do you ensure effective endings with groups? Is it different than ending with individuals? Well, when you're ending a group, you're going to take a more directive role as the group is ending, just as you did in the beginning. In the beginning of a group, you're very directive and in charge, and then you let the group take over. But towards the end, you want to, again, take over a stronger role. You shouldn't introduce any new activities or topics towards the end. And you should, just like with reviewing the work with the client, you should review the history of the group and reinforce the progress and accomplishments made. Allow members to process their feelings related to the end of the group and address your own feelings. Review how members can incorporate the gains they made and help them to anticipate and address any future problems they might encounter. Ask the group for feedback on how the group went for them and how you could improve future groups. Provide resources and referrals. Do they need a new group to go to, or they need to be referred to individual counseling? It might be different for each client. And just like with individual clients, goodbye rituals can be very important. Some kind of ceremony, some kind of gratitude or appreciation exercise. I think this picture shows a web activity where you demonstrate how we're all woven together in the group, even though we're ending. And then if you are not working directly with clients, but working in an administrative capacity at your agency, you want to make sure that you complete all projects and reports that were tasked to you. Get feedback and suggestions for the next steps of those those projects. Prepare some kind of written transfer summary and then transfer the task to the appropriate person. Terminate any relationships with stakeholders that you're working with, a community group or other agencies, and with the staff members you're working with. Reflect and evaluate on your experience with your supervisor. Find a way to say a meaningful thanks and goodbye to the people in the agency that you've worked with. And then you're going to have a final meeting with your supervisor. Hopefully you've had a very positive relationship with your supervisor, and that it will be sad to say goodbye. Acknowledge feelings about the ending of your relationship. Review the progress that you've made while working at the internship, and evaluate your experience, which you'll get to do with your evaluation form. Hope you'll be able to give each other mutual feedback and express mutual gratitude, and say goodbye. It's possible that you will continue to have a relationship with the supervisor as a mentor or a future colleague, or you may even become the boss of your person. One of my former practicum instructors called me later on to ask me for a job. So kind of interesting how things happen with those relationships. So this is the discussion board for this week. What emotions are you experiencing as you anticipate the end of your internship? Which of these emotions are you comfortable with? Which emotions are more uncomfortable to acknowledge or discuss? How well prepared are your clients and colleagues for the end of your internship? To what extent have they been aware of your internship, that you would be leaving at a specific point in time? What have you done to prepare them for departure? And describe a challenge you anticipate as you prepare to end your internship placement. So we'll be talking more about this in the next couple of weeks, and I hope that you'll have this discussion with your supervisor about how to make sure that your clients are prepared for your departure and well taken care of after you leave.